Hashrate is sponsored by Vanta Investment DAO. Get the Vanta NFT on OpenSea and gain instant access to an exclusive community that gets allocations in cutting-edge sectors like GameFi, DeFi, artificial intelligence, and infrastructure. Vanta is a powerhouse hive mind of over 250 visionaries, from trailblazing company founders to savvy investors to a cold community influencing over 10 million followers on X. Join key industry players like Mario Nawfal, Seed Phrase, the CEO of QuantStamp, and myself, Mark Jeffrey, among others, who are already navigating the private investment landscape together through Vanta. Get your Vanta NFT and join the action today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hashrate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is David Minarsch, the founder of OLAS. Hello, David. How you doing?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm good.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. So it's nice and noon your time. It's 3 a.m. my time. So it's the only time we could make this work. So it's late night. We'll give it a go, see how this all turns out. So I am sort of familiar with BitTensor. I've done like 4 shows on it. And Morpheus, I've done 2 shows on. So I'm kind of familiar with their universes. Tell me about OLAS. What is OLAS and how does it sort of fit into the larger picture of crypto meets AI?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. So let me anchor it based on the 2 projects you just mentioned. So I think one way to look at Morpheus is like some co-pilot for people to basically utilize DeFi, other kind of blockchain technologies, and maybe beyond. And it's almost like like a smart wallet, smart agent, which helps you navigate the world, right?
Yeah.
If you think about BitTensor, then they have all these subnets which help train models and provide inference as well for models. Now, what does OLAS do? We focus on basically more autonomous agents. So if you think about self-driving cars, just as an analogy, you've got your assistant technologies, which would be the smart wallet from Morpheus in this case, and then you have your sort of autonomous driving car like your Waymo or hopefully one day the Tesla as well. And so basically an autonomous AI agent, as we focused on in OLAS, really autonomously gets things done. So the user does not necessarily interact with it for very long periods of time. It might just turn it on and give it some initial instructions and then let it do its thing. So that's
it's like a robot that I give standing orders to, right? So it's exactly. Stuff like, watch my pet food, and when my pet food starts running out, order me more pet food and find me the best price today. Something like that. Is that kind of a good example?
Yeah, I mean that's one example, for your cat.
Yeah. So and yes, Morpheus seems to be the sort of thing where I download it. So the AI, the agent, is running on my computer, and it's sort of assisting me with DeFi, and I can talk to it with natural language and tell it what I want it to do, and it will then operate my wallet, and it knows about DeFi. I don't have to understand anything. It'll just go. If I'm like, I have stable coins, go make me the best yield possible. That's sort of an example of what they're focused on. Yours is more of a cloud agent, right? Like, it's sort of what I'm getting from you. And it's sort of, is that correct?
Doesn't have to be. So, but let's dive in there. So you ultimately, maybe let's zoom out first on what's the mission for OLAS, and then I'll come back to answering that. So the mission for us is to basically allow everyone to have one or multiple autonomous agents that are doing useful things in their life, be it around, the 3 big areas, let's say, like wealth, well-being, and sort of, no, the third one evades me.
That's okay. We'll do those 2. Those 2 are fine.
Yeah, those 2 are fine. And so, an example here is the equivalent of where you would have a smart agent where maybe you instruct them directly when you have an intent. So let's say you want to trade on Uniswap, or maybe you don't even have to be as specific, but maybe you want to buy a certain coin or things like that. That's fine, right? That's definitely a use case. Another kind of use case is that, and that's more for users who might not even know much about DeFi, is like to say, okay, well, really all I care about is that like an autonomous agent implements some sort of portfolio strategy for me, right? So like kind of you totally outsource it to the agent. Your intent is basically to just grow your portfolio, and maybe you select a couple of hyperparameters. Another example would be you have like an agent which works on your behalf in like some specific context, and I'll give you some use cases we're working on at the moment. But if you then take this, there's now different ways in which you can run the agent. So one opportunity you have is like in the Morphos example you were giving, you can go to operate.olas.network, and you can simply download the agent on your local device and run it there. You can equally install it in like a cloud environment, which you control access to, or you could run it on one of those decentralized substrates like Akash, right? So that's like totally up to you where you run the agent. And that means you like equally have full control over the software and sort of its configuration, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, one thing I'm confused about is actually, let's go somewhere else, because actually I have a question I think might clarify it. So in 3 years' time, which in crypto is an eternity, you get your way. This thing is a giant, massive success. What does it look like? Does it look like I can picture something that's sort of like an app store that consumers go to, and they just have all these different agents that are offered to them. They could be like, oh, that one sounds cool. I want to use that one. And then I just sort of, fill in my parameters and it just runs in the cloud. And I don't have to worry about setting it up myself or really thinking much about it. Is that the vision, or is it something else?
Yeah, so that the marketplace is one potential way to look at it. Although the way we call autonomous agents without using that term is like sort of outcomes generators. Ultimately, I care about high level outcomes as a human, right? I do things because I enjoy them. I do things because I want to get wealthier. So ultimately, a lot of this decision making as to, how I get wealthier and how maybe I could enjoy things, I could also outsource to the agent. So really the vision is that you ultimately control like your personal fleet of autonomous agents. And they're, deployed in different scenarios, sometimes locally, sometimes remotely, depending on what the use case is and what they're actually doing. But like ultimately, they're working for you and on your behalf to help you achieve these outcomes. So the marketplace might be there, and like already we have a lot of different agents in OLAS. But actually, you could imagine that in the future that the agent itself, like some sort of primary agent, which works on your behalf, coordinates another set of agents for you on your behalf. So it might say, okay, you agent over there, do this for me, and you agent over there, do this for me. Ultimately, this brings up an interesting point, which is that of like multiple agents, right? And that's actually one of the strong cases of OLAS, which is that our agents tend to, like in our use cases, tend to not involve like a single agent type. There tends to be very different types of agents specializing in different problems. So one of the use cases we can talk about, OLAS Predict, like a prediction market use case, exactly has this kind of format.
Yeah, I went through your the agents that have been deployed, and your website says there's 487 agents that are deployed right now, and it gave like 10 example kind of agents. One of them was for a prediction market. And what I saw was something called MEX, and it said on-chain requests. And so this MEC exists on a blockchain, but it's sort of like Chainlink in that it can talk to the outside world. So it processes your requests. The request comes in on-chain. The processing takes place off-chain, and the prediction agents in particular. When they, so for example, like right now, we're all wondering whether the Ethereum ETF will get approved or not, right? The word is that it will, but 24 hours ago, the word was that it wouldn't, right? It was kind of like 1% chance, and then as of like noon today, it was up to 75% chance, right? So really big flip. So that would be an example of something that the agent in the prediction market would have to go and check and see, like, oh, okay, what are the odds now? They're very different now.
Right. So, and like, especially with prediction markets, they're like really, really core of what autonomous agents do. If you think about it like conceptually, right? Like ultimately entrusting software to do things on your behalf is a bit of a can of worms, because you ultimately, you might care about having actual control over the software, right? You don't want to hand it out to something like OpenAI, where they shut it down for you, or they change the model, or they, introduce biases or whatever. That's one thing. But the other thing is, even if you solve all these problems, right, like in this kind of perfect land of it runs in a verified architecture, decentralized, the model is open source, blah, 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 blah. Ultimately, it's never a good idea to rely on a single model or architecture, because you can, like we already know this, like AI researchers already talk about this a lot. It's like things like model can be poisoned around certain areas of where it can be active. It can hallucinate. There can be all sorts of problems. And so what you really want to do is, like, you want to base your decisions and those your agent makes on like wisdom of the crowd. Like we humans, we don't, if there's something significant, we don't just trust one person or like just take input from one place. And that's where prediction markets come in, right? They kind of at the core of autonomous agent decision making, because if you have prediction markets, then autonomous agents can use them as a basis. So if an agent, for instance, has a very important decision to make, rather than researching the question and finding out the answer itself, which would it be relying on its own sort of capabilities, it can go out, spin up a prediction market autonomously, and then have like hundreds of agents participate there, right? And kind of draw on that wisdom of these AI agents.
Yeah, so the composability, if you will, of these agents is very similar to the composability of DeFi, where, so basically, you like in DeFi, I won't get into, let me put it this way. So they're like Lego bricks, right? So DeFi is described as money Legos that are snapped together, that you have more and more complex things. So it's like atoms lead to molecules, which lead to compounds. Like it's kind of like that. And by the time you're sort of up here, you have very complex interactions going on, which probably the agent that's up here only understands, and the humans have sort of lost track of what all the pieces down here are doing. And the human doesn't need to know. And that can get very powerful very quickly, right? So I think that's basically what you're describing.
Yeah, exactly. Like this combination of capabilities and having multiple agents specializing in things and then kind of aggregating this has this definitive overlap with DeFi, as you say, or this analogy. And actually, it's one of the strong cases also in this kind of crypto AI intersection, right? Like often this question comes up, like, is this even a thing, like crypto and AI, right? And one of the strong things is around composability in crypto. Like there's this kind of composability in Web 2 where, you have some nice API and then you go to it and it has a high uptime and it's like beautifully designed docs and so on. And that's great, right? But they always limit it to what you can do by basically what the designer intended you to do. Whereas in crypto, you have this kind of composability, which much more open. And we see this like in DeFi, people build protocols on top of each other where the initial designer would have never intended or even thought about this. And it's similar with multi-agent use cases where, okay, now let's offer like agents which can reliably predict the future. Well, now new things can be built on top. That can be very valuable. And whilst you're doing this, you're creating effectively entire like economies of synthetic things, right?
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. So let's talk about the OLAS token for a moment. So, looking at something like BitTensor, it has the Tau token. The Tau token is basically emitted in a Bitcoin-like fashion to reward subnets for producing great AI. And that's pretty cool. It's working wonders. It's a great sort of act one. But there is no sort of Tau economy, right? So if I'm consuming the AI, I don't have to pay in Tau as though it were gas, right? Like Ethereum uses gas. Mm-hmm. There is no concept of that. And we can debate whether there should be one or not, but there isn't right now. In Morpheus, they don't have a meter running for the More token. You don't have to pay the More token, but you do have to stake it in order to use the More network. And the percentage of More you stake that's a percentage of the sort of overall AI compute or agent compute that you're allowed to use, I guess, in a particular session. And I don't know exactly how that works yet. They may not have defined that fully, but I've heard this described by Eric Voorhees as the utility for the Moore token. In the OLAS network, the people who make the agents, the people who use the agents, do they have to use the OLAS token to use the agents in some way? And the people that make the agents, are they getting paid in OLAS for things in a way other than emissions?
Yeah, great question. So let's dive into the tokenomics, and I'll preempt one point, which is that from my perspective, obviously there's a lot of evolution to come yet. And so I'll talk about first like what it is right now, what's currently being built, and then some of the ideas I have. So what is right now? We have these different ways in which you can contribute to this kind of idea of co-owned AI and co-owned autonomous agents and all that. There's kind of 6 roles. If you go to the site, you can find them. One of the key roles, which is very tightly linked with the tokenomics, is that of the bonder. So effectively, what the bonders do is they bring the token to new networks. Why does that? Like, they basically create liquidity there, and then they're incentivized to basically sell that liquidity to the protocol to get OLAS at a discount. Now, why is that relevant, right? Like, that doesn't even yet speak to value capture. It's just about bringing liquidity to the chains on which the agents actually want to do things and can do things.
Protocol-owned liquidity, so very similar to what Ohm did.
Exactly.
In the early days of DeFi. Ohm there were some great ideas in Ohm. I know everyone's like, oh, but you know what? Actually, there were some great ideas in there. They weren't all great, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I see that you've taken some of the good ideas and run with them.
Exactly. So the mechanism has some excellent parts to it, and you need to be careful about like how fast it can go. Otherwise, it becomes very reflexive. So we've kind of taken care of that. Now, once the OLAS token is in a decentralized way, it now arrives at multiple networks, right? Today, 8 chains, but it's like constantly growing. Now you have the token there. Then this allows the operators of the agents to basically onboard onto a network without having to, let's say, go via Ethereum, where the token was launched. So, for instance, the operators who are participating in running agents in this prediction economy, so we call these people operators, they basically can go to Gnosis chain right now and like natively onboard there, get OLAS there, and then use that in staking, which I'll come to in a second. But so you can see that by having these bonders bring this liquidity there, it brings like a UX benefit for these people who are basically running agents. And the other big thing is protocol and liquidity itself generates revenue, right? Because like you have the trading fees through the pools, which is now captured by the protocol. So far, like the OLAS DAO, I think has captured around like 2 million worth of revenue from that. So now, before I get back to the operator, like you have to ask, where does the agent actually originally come from, right? Someone has to design it. And so since over a year, we have this basically dev rewards mechanism, which is permissionless. So basically developers develop these agent components, this Lego bricks, which we mentioned earlier, and they kind of register them in a certain way in the protocol. And then every epoch, they like kind of earn these emissions. How this all works is quite involved, but basically long story short is like, as a developer, as a builder, you can build like these components, bring them to the protocol, and then be rewarded for your contributions to the protocol.
That makes sense. Do I have to stake some Do I have to stake some OLAS in order to register my agent?
Not to register, but those who want to basically trigger the emissions to developers via what's called a donation mechanism. It's a bit of a bad name we learned afterwards, but like basically that's how it's called. The mechanism which triggers the emissions goes via basically VOLAS holders. So VOLAS is the governance token, the vote escrow one. So basically what you do there is you like align basically like these emissions with the long-term incentives of those holders, right? So what you can't do is like come in and like quickly like trigger some emission in some way and then leave again, because you need to have access to these VOLAS.
Yeah, so the VEOLS, so I think I know what you're saying. You're basically, it's a curve-like thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So voting escrow.
Vote escrow, exactly.
And so basically, you have to have some OLAS, and somebody has to come along and lock their OLAS. I don't know if it's permanent on Curve, I think. It's probably semi-permanent in your system, because I think later systems like solidly.
It's between 1 week and 4 years, and like depending how long you lock like a fixed amount, the more voting power you get.
Got it. And so that voting power, that person then has to cast their votes. Somebody has to cast their VE OLAS votes for that specific agent. You know, like, we like this agent. This is providing value to the network. So we want this agent to get emissions from OLAS. That's basically what you're saying.
That's how it should work one day. Currently, it's a bit simpler, where it's basically just doing like a check whether you like have sufficient VOLAS to trigger these emissions. But like, ideally, it's much more proportional. So that's actually one of the AIPs, which is currently like the autonomous improvement proposals, which is currently proposing that to be improved.
Got it. It's early days. I understand. Okay.
So right. Yeah.
There yet. Yeah.
But that definitely works. What I'm very proud about, and I think lots of members, it's permissionless. So since over a year, like every epoch, I think there's been 12 or so, these devs earn these rewards, and like basically quite nice for seeing like the different community members contributing this. I can share some links for the show notes later. So now we've covered like builder, and we've covered like this case of the bonder. And so now let's come to actually running agents, right? So like right now, what you can do is you can go to operate.olas.network, and then you'll see like this download link for an agent, and you can download it, and then you can basically run it on against Gnosis Chain. So it runs off chain, but it has a wallet on Gnosis Chain, and it's registered in the protocol on Gnosis Chain, and it participates in these prediction markets.
So I just want to get this straight. So no matter what chain you're on 8 chains. You mentioned that earlier. It's like Solana, Ethereum, I think Arbitrum, Optimism, things like that, and Gnosis. No matter what chain you're running on, that agent maintains a wallet on Gnosis. Is that correct?
It maintains a wallet on any network where it wants to do something. It's always account abstraction. So it uses Safe under the hood. And in the case of Solana, it uses squats.
Got it. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No, that's great. And so literally the flow is, you can try it out. You download it, you install this and you run it, and then it'll ask you to stake some OLAS. And then we have this mechanism, which is kind of unique to our protocol. We call it proof of active agent. So basically your agent always gets rewarded when it works. It's like an employee showing up at work, like with a, scorecard. It needs to show that it's done its work, and then it gets its staking rewards. And if it doesn't on a given day, then it doesn't get them. If it then works again on another day, it'll get them. If it takes up a working slot, like a staking slot, and it doesn't work for a consecutive number of days, it gets fired, like evicted. So it's literally
okay. So what is working? Is it usage by an end user? Is that defined working?
So this in the current setting up till a couple of weeks from now, when we launch OLAS staking as a main core feature of the protocol, currently it's in a testing phase where it's exactly one type of smart contract which emits these staking rewards, and it's focused on these prediction markets. So in this context, basically there's various on-chain metrics which are tracked around the agents participating correctly in these markets, basically providing value there by trading and using the other agents and so on. But we're making this super composable now. So in ETH10, where we presented the white paper, and now the code has actually been implemented, goes into contest next week for the code review. And basically, this becomes super permissionless. So anyone can create you can think of it a bit like a subnet, but it's not a subnet. It's an agent economy, like a staking contract, mm-hmm. where you embed these KPIs, literally this is what I want these agents to hit against. You either do this on chain in the form of smart contracts, or you could do some more complex things with CK and so on in the future. But basically, you say, here are my KPIs. Then you work with the builders to have agents which work against these KPIs. And then you go and you lock OLAS and basically can, with like a gauge system, and there we have that already, like what you referenced earlier with the DEF rewards, we have that for staking now, where you basically then, with your voting power, can direct these emissions towards these staking economies. And that basically what this enables, once it's live on mainnet in a month or so, is that really like the staking system is also super permissionless. So let's say a group of builders on like Arbitrum wants to, like, we're working with a couple of builders there who want to do like DeFi use cases. So they have very specific agents which work in the DeFi context, and they want to basically incentivize operators to run them. They can then take OLAS, lock it for VOLAS, direct some emissions to that staking contract, and then the agents get rewarded when they hit those emissions, those KPIs.
Okay. What about usage? So I'm an end user. I want to start using these agents. Does that require OLAS in some way?
That's a great question. So at the moment, basically, we're like in this bootstrapping phase. So there's no like gas fee in this sense yet. But obviously, the protocol has to think about value capture, right? And so one mechanism I mentioned before, which is protocol and liquidity. The second one is also already live, which is basically that agents themselves can be decentralized off-chain system. I know it's like super complex, but like imagine basically rather than one node, it's multiple and they're kind of doing the same thing. And in that case, it's possible for the DAO to basically capture like value from these systems. So for instance, this MEC agent, which you referred to earlier, is actually deployed as such a decentralized off-chain system. So the idea is that as this becomes more profitable, the DAO actually like captures some profits from this. And now I'm talking about the future. I do think that like basically what we're building here is a lot of agent economies, right? And all these agents are basically trading with each other in specific use cases. So already we're like, for instance, with a new product which we're launching today in Berlin, we're already introducing gas abstraction there. So that brings a new way for the OLAS protocol actually to offer like this kind of gas abstraction across all these networks where it's on, and introduce like some value capture there from the agents. And then like ultimately, I really think in terms of like how we should think about this like conceptually is that like what we're really building is this kind of like economy of these synthetic agents, and like ultimately OLAS is providing like kind of all these rails on which these agents can do useful things for the end users. And so where it makes sense and where it's feasible, the OLAS protocol should introduce like basically small fees, like like you do in liquidity pools.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm glad. I'm actually very happy to hear that, and I have not heard that from the other people in the room doing similar AI crypto things, or sort of similar. One of my big gripes with BitTensor is I love a lot of things about it. I own some Tau, but I don't like the fact that there is no reward for usage. So you get things that are actually very useful, I think, and very interesting, but they're also science projects. They're not products, in the sense that there is no product market fit. There is no evolutionary pressure upon them to produce things that are used by consumers, right? So, just because everybody thinks you're cool, maybe nobody uses your science project ever. It is cool, but who cares, right? That's not a marketplace. That's the Soviet Union, right? That's centralized planning, right? It's bad. It doesn't work.
Right.
So I like the fact that there should be, even if it's a little amount, basically, if you make something awesome and everybody uses it, you should get paid a buttload of whatever the coin is that you're collecting. And if you produce something that nobody cares about, then that should die and wither and somehow go away, right? The evolutionary pressure, it has to exist in a system. So congrats.
Totally agree.
I'm happy to hear it. Yeah.
And like, I mean, I'm actually also a fan of BitTensor. Particularly what I like about it is the way they have created a community. I think I'm pretty impressed, like how many people are building like very cool things. And then like, as you're saying, like, I think one thing which we like looking at this, like, and other protocols and our own ideas was like very key for us is that emissions need to be like super targeted, and like that's what proof of active agent does, right? So that fixes this issue where on the emission side you're kind of giving it to something which isn't actually doing anything, and then like as you say, like you still have like even if your emissions are very targeted, ultimately like there needs to be overall like basically it needs to be a business, and so that's where these mechanisms come in, which we talked about. And like the interesting thing with multi-agent systems and autonomous agents in general is like OLAS Predict has 3 different types of agents, and then there's many different copies of them, right, which people are running in different configurations. And it becomes quite sticky for this as a system because they basically all rely on each other. So it's much easier from a mechanism designer point of view, which like the OLAS protocol is basically, to introduce mechanisms where it is able to capture some value, but at the same time also provides like still the added benefit of it actually being there in the first place, right? Because you can't just sort of extract rent for no reason. You won't have a business either.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. So some of the other agents I saw, just so people have an idea of what what else is out there right now. Baby Degen. So it's an agent which trades for you in DeFi. So you were sort of discussing that use case. Another one called Governatoor, and it's helping DAOs decentralize by replacing the humans in a DAO. You want to talk about that one for a second? Because that seems like a big one.
It's a big one. It's probably the hardest one, actually, we've done so far. But it's very interesting because it allows me also to talk about this concept of decentralized autonomous agents. So Governatoor, like in the simplest sense, is like basically someone you can delegate tokens to, in this case a thing, to vote on your behalf in DAOs, right? Like we all know this, we hold a bunch of tokens and either we don't vote at all, or if you vote, it's like annoying because time and cost. And so in an ideal case, you kind of find someone like another human where you can delegate it to, but then they have all the work of reading all these proposals and all this stuff. So Governatoor kind of solves that problem, right? Like it basically takes that work of humans and lets it done by an autonomous agent. But if you imagine there was a single node somewhere where everyone delegates the tokens to, and then it reads these proposals and uses a large language model to make these decisions, that does not sound very like a good idea, because firstly, you'd have to trust the operator, even if it's verifiable, right? You still have this problem, which I mentioned before, like the model itself could be like poor in like some area, like just bad. It could be actually poisoned in some area. So someone with foresight of you using this model could have introduced like bad training data to make the model behave in a certain way in a certain like space, part of latent space. Or you could even have this issue where effectively like the model makes things up, right? And so like this hallucination problem. And so you do not want like a single agent just like doing the stuff. So actually at the very core of like our stack, like our software, is this ability to run the same software, not just as one node, but like as 10 nodes, 20 nodes, 30 nodes. And so you can have like these form like this off-chain node network, which does the exact same thing as a single agent would do, only that now obviously we replicate work and we effectively have this kind of optimistic voting between them. So because this is non-deterministic, right? These large language models are non-deterministic. Like you don't always get the same answers, what that means. So if I basically have now, let's say 10 agents in Governatoor, which all form the total Governatoor as such, these can all individually read the proposals, make up their mind, so to speak, and then come to agreement collectively, right? Before they actually vote on chain. And that's a much more robust system, because now each of these agents can use a different large language model. Like some of them can use open source, some of them can use like something like OpenAI, whatever. And then they vote, and that voting process is like basically very synchronized.
It's like a blockchain. It's like another consensus algorithm. Yeah.
100%. It actually uses Tendermint under the hood. And it's secured via our staking mechanism. So there you go, So now you have like a robust governance system. And so Governatoor is live. The reason why I said it's the most complex is by no means finished as we would like it to. So it's, preference, aggregating voter preferences and giving people the ability to express those very complex And so there's a lot of building to be done. So if anyone of the listener wants to build, like we'll support.
Yeah, appreciated. So one of the other ones I saw was something called Shorts WTF. So it generates short films, so short little video films. I watched a couple of them from a prompt. And one thing I didn't understand about that was that struck me as something that was more like Midjourney or ChatGPT, where it's not, it's not an agent. It just sort of sits there until you poke it with a prompt, and then it goes and does something, and then it goes back to sleep again. How is that particular agent an agent?
So yeah, I mean, in the sense, you're correct. It's what's underlying it is more like a workflow, right? Like, so it waits for a prompt and then like it executes it. The reason why we build it is like we wanted to showcase different possibilities on the stack, right? So that was one thing. And then also, if you're looking ahead, like with these staking economies, one thing I didn't mention yet is there's this huge data potential from them, because in OLAS Predict, we're generating all the synthetic data, which you then can use to train further models. We, like, the big vision we have, like, for the next few years is to, with other teams or enable other teams to basically create the Harvard of agents, like the Hollywood of agents, the yep. the hospitals of agents, where there's research now on these topics, where basically researchers, like AI researchers, will build like different types of agents in a multi-agent system, and then they replicate a hospital. You take that onto OLAS, you get all the emissions, you can build like really, really fantastic, like cutting edge research agent and so on. And so here, coming back to Shorts, it's like the really bad currently version of Hollywood, but like that's kind of inspiring those minds and like kind of starting a conversation to show what's possible.
Okay. One of the other things that I forget who it was who actually pitched you guys to me for the first time, but they saw my other episodes on, BitTensor, blah, blah, blah. They said, hey, have you talked to these Auto Nolas? That's what they were calling you, which I guess was your old name. And you wisely shortened it to just OLAS. So congratulations on that. But one of the sort of main pitch points was it's the only system in which people can co-own agents. So, instead of just one person owning it, I guess like Morpheus, only one person can own it. In your system, it's sort of like each agent is like a little mini company. And if I have some OLAS, I guess by staking it and voting for them, that's how I co-own it. And then I get some of the emissions. Is that how that works? Or?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because there's different levels to that co-ownership, right? Like, so I can be like a token holder, like in other protocols, and then sort of I co-own like some parts of the protocol and indirectly some agents. I can like outright own an agent by downloading it, running it on my machine, funding it, and then having it participate in prediction markets and other use cases. But then coming back to Governatoor, right, here I can quite literally physically co-own an agent on the infrastructure level, because as I've said, like this is like, the Governatoor is made up of a lot of agents which make it up. So any given agent doesn't make the Governatoor, and then all of them together make the Governatoor. So here I can like quite physically co-own an agent. I can have like a DAO. This was actually our original go-to-market, so to speak, as like we were talking to a lot of DAOs and say, look, like you have all these off-chain processes. A lot of them you do actually have in code, but they run on a GitHub action or a GitHub action plus some AWS thingy. And like, wouldn't you want to have all these processes in an autonomous agent system where each one of your DAO members, or at least the core members, run one agent each, and only once they're all kind of running and like secured via the staking system, would they do their thing, right? And that's where this kind of physical idea of the co-ownership came from.
Okay. How many people are working on this? Like, how big is the team at this point?
So, there's like, on the site, you'll see like all the builders, like there's like 10 or so different builder groups. Like the biggest team is the core team, which is Valerie. So that's where I'm the CEO. So Valerie itself has around 30 people at the moment.
Wow. Okay. And how long have you all been working on this?
So I've been working on autonomous agent for over 5 years. So Valerie exists since summer 2021. And like the Autonomous, like the first sort of bits of the DAO was like basically a Discord as it starts with like, basically the docs and like the agent architectures and the demos that started in September 2021.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So it's older than I thought it was. So OLAS in some form or another has been underway for about 3.5 years, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then like it's in stages, right? Very progressive. So initially there was just a Discord, then there was like an on-chain DAO, and then there was like the publicly tradable token, and like the protocol features came, like the sort of V1 was their last February, and then like since then we've been like adding new things with like improvement proposals and so on.
Yeah, so I did take a look at the token, and as of right now, or at least when I looked at it this afternoon, it was floating at around $120 million market cap. It was like $3 per token. You have 41 million tokens circulating. And I had conflicting information on this. One source said a 538 million cap. Another one said infinite cap. Which is there a cap on it, or is it infinite?
Great question. So the 500 whatever it is the total supply at the moment. So basically what's minted. Okay. And the token itself, on the token contract, you can look this up, has like this inflation curve hard coded into it. So it can never go beyond that. And that's like the maximum it could go to in the first 10 years is 1 billion. And then after that, the maximum it can grow at whatever it is at 10 years is 2% per annum. But that's like hard coded, like you can't go beyond. But what the DAO can do via basically all the, token emission mechanisms, so bonding, the DEF rewards, and the staking, it can like control this. So actually what we're seeing right now is that like we're way below the emissions which could be. Basically there's much more conservative emissions for the first 1.5 years or so since it's emitting.
Got it. Okay. I also watched another pod that you were on recently, and the topic of building agents came up, and I thought that was pretty interesting. You basically get in this situation, ChatGPT can't get out of its box and become the Terminator because it needs a prompt, right? It just sits there and does nothing until somebody pokes it, and then it does something, and then it goes back to sleep. Whereas if you now have a world where agents are building agents and they're autonomous, they're sort of like cron jobs. They wake up when they wake up, based on some preset criterion, or maybe they're always awake. And they're increasing in complexity over time, maybe to the point where nobody understands anymore that, nobody made of meat and bone anyway understands what's going on inside of its, silicon soul, and perhaps this is an overblown fear. A lot of the AI D-cells and, AI nanny people certainly are bringing this fear up. Everybody's watched Terminator one too many times. But nonetheless, like, I do, some very smart people like Elon do seem to have a fear of a very hyper-intelligent AGI somehow emerging from this LLM stuff, or maybe something we haven't seen yet. How do you make sense of that? How do you live in a world where AI regulation and AI safety may suddenly come out of nowhere and kind of start turning off light switches around anything that's remotely related to AI? How do you think about that side of this whole equation?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the extreme, right, it's very easy to rile people up about there will be this AGI killing us all, and therefore we need to kind of work back from there. My concern is like not with that. I mean, I think there's a lot of performance art around this. Like, ultimately, I think we need to start like thinking from now and say, okay, well, what is the reality? The reality is that access and basically to the best models and their training is very centralized, and it's very varying from like kind of how these models come together, like the biases they build in as a result, the data and so on. Is it like, all of us generated this data, yet someone has basically the model? That's one aspect of it. Then the whole economic relevance which comes from this, right? Like, ultimately, I'm much, much more concerned about a situation where we all have to pay tax to OpenAI and Google and Meta than this ultimate like disaster scenario, because I think we'll live through these kind of feudal days way before we get to this kind of super AGI, right? So I think that's where, our mission is very relevant. Like, we care about co-owning AI, co-owning autonomous agents, because we think that everyone should have access to like the cutting edge technology and be able to utilize it in their day. Now, I do think like there's like certain risks beyond that, right? Like at the pure technical level, where you can say, okay, well, let's imagine like, okay, we solve these economic issues. Everyone has fair access to this great technology, but now this technology becomes better and better and better. Like, should we worry about that? And yeah, I do think we should worry about it. Like, I'm with Elon, it's not something to ignore. But I don't think we'll solve it by basically having humans trying to build guardrails which they sort of impose. And I think what we need is to say, okay, well, what is the likely outcome here? There's a certain chance that there'll be this sort of one magical agent which has like super powerful models underneath, and it sort of takes over, and it's like this like quick takeoff scenario where this single entity is so powerful and accumulating resources so fast that everything else doesn't have a chance. Like, there's a lot of reasons why this is actually quite unlikely. Like, access to like resources. We already see this with training models. Like, it's non-trivial to get access to large amounts of resources, build large data centers with all the energy requirements. And then, like, I think fundamentally, my gut feeling is,
I mean, if it can own a wallet, like AI, crypto is the only form of money that an AI can own directly, right? So, if it has money, it can go to Akash and pay for more GPU, right? And that GPU is being
right, but you ultimately run into resource constraints. I mean, this thing where it sort of goes from like, being something super powerful in the OpenAI back office to it being a paperclip maximizer and eating up the universe's energy. There's a lot of steps in between, and I do think it's a bit like quick to jump to that conclusion that it will somehow just sort of be all over the place. Actually, the reason why I think that is because I've done game theory back in the day. I did a PhD in game theory, and like totally unrelated to AI, we were just studying this problem where you have like a graph and you basically have conflict between nodes. Like, all the nodes on the graph are basically like have resources and they can attack their neighbors. And we were like studying under which conditions basically you can have like a hegemony, like someone taking over everything. And it really depends on like the topology of the network. Like, there's a lot of topologies where it will be never possible for one entity to just take everything over. And so that guides my thinking there a bit. But long story short, the point I want to make is, I think ultimately you govern and like make safe AI through multi-agent system. Like, you have to think about it like a societal challenge of AIs. And like the way we solve it with humans is that we create like a police, jurisdiction, like legal systems, right? And then there's this division of labor and like specialization. And then I think that's, it's not going to be one-to-one that. We need to be careful that we don't, take that analogy too far and like kind of miss the point. But I do think we can learn from that to say, okay, well, can we create programs that govern other programs? Can we create programs that watch other programs, right? And what does that look like? And we basically then talking about a multi-agent system, exactly of the kind OLAS does like today in a smaller way, right?
Yeah. No, I look, I agree with you. I just wanted to see what you would say about that particular question. I do believe, like you, I think that the bigger danger is that we get AI that's somehow not telling us the truth effectively, because its training data or its parameters have been set in such a way that it'll either outright lie, or it just will refuse to answer certain questions. I recently ran into a medical issue, which I'm not going to get into, and I spoke about it on the last show, that basically only Venice AI, which is Eric Voorhees, libertarian, free and open, it'll tell as much of the truth as possible. AI built on Morpheus. it answered the question very specifically and with the data I was looking for to back it up. And none of the other AIs would touch it. They were just like, nope, I'm just a training model. I can't answer that question. Right? It did that whole thing. Right. So, which I think is dangerous. I think it's bad. I think we should be able to ask questions and get answers, and maybe the answers are uncomfortable, and I think that we should be okay with that. Right. So, I'm with you that truthful AI, the problem is once people get their hands on it, they'll morph it into, whatever their self-image is and whatever their beliefs are and sort of push them on everyone else. And that's bad. So I'm with you that the free speech AI is the thing. It sounds to me, my personal view of the LLMs, I'm not an expert on it. You probably are, and I'm not. But I do have a software engineering background. And I did study how they work, and they basically seem to more or less be autocompletes. Really, it's a really fancy autocomplete. And it's effectively, it's not reasoning. It's got the entire corpus of the internet or whatever it trained on inside of its head. And it just statistically looks for, what word follows what word more probabilistically than any other outcome. So it's effectively mining sentience exhaust. So it's a parlor trick on a certain level, right? So I don't see a parlor trick that doesn't actually reasoning. It doesn't have agency. It doesn't have sentience. It doesn't have consciousness. Yeah. It's not even that in miniature in some way, right? So do you agree with me on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's very important to understand that they're not agents.
Yeah. They don't have, I think we've modeled the human brain very well in some ways. But we're missing we're missing the thing that drives everything else. And I don't think we know it. We don't know what consciousness is yet. I think we still don't know. And I
think there's there's obviously these current generation architectures which certainly are agentic, and then people are trying to see how can you make these type of architectures or extend these type of architectures to give them more reasoning capabilities, memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, all sorts of things, right? To make them more agentic. And that push is definitely there. It's logic, the way we think about it, Valerie, is you have rules-based learning and then agentic. That's clear path in AI. Everyone wants to have agentic AI, obviously, because it's useful. But it's hard to say. I mean, if you look at Jan LeCun from Meta, right? Then he will say I don't want to paraphrase him, but basically definitely agrees that these aren't the kind of capable systems we are after. And then it's hard to see when we'll make another big step there. But what's clear is that an organization like OpenAI, which kind of is not open,
no.
asks everyone to be regulated but themselves, and isn't honest. Their leadership is not honest about what they're doing.
No, did you hear they stole they made a fake Scarlett Johansson voice?
Yeah.
Did you hear about that? Yeah.
This is just one of many things. I mean, it's just not the way, right? And we know their governance doesn't work. I mean, we saw it in November. So that's not the way. It's very straightforward. Not the way.
So before we go, David, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you came to what made you interested in this project.
Yeah, so I did a PhD in game theory. So that was driven by my interest in maths and economics, and had a lot of fun there. Learned a lot of things, but ultimately wanted to affect the real world a bit more. And so after that, I went into basically more data science and machine learning angle in London, UK. Basically worked at fintechs and startups for a while. And then I tried my first proper startup, failed at that, which was actually great. I think a lot of the things I know about organizing a good startup and running one now is about failing at one before.
Yeah.
And then in 2017, when I was in that cohort for that startup, it was something like YC, but in Europe, Entrepreneur First. I actually was in a cohort with a lot of crypto projects, and I had been exposed to crypto since 2013, but never sort of fully went into it. And when my startup then failed, which wasn't in crypto back then, I said, okay, now is the time to really focus on like what I want. Because when you're younger, I think you're often driven by these sort of, I have to do certain things because certain factors around me drive me to do them. But then I was like, no, I'm doing what I want, which is like this intersection between like basically doing what I had done before, like game theory, and then like AI, what I had been doing since. And I wanted to combine that with like decentralized technology and blockchains and like, whatever falls into the crypto basket, and create products there. And I was looking around, and like, if you think about this intersection, sort of agent is the obvious thing. Fetch AI was a project which was early there. And I joined them and basically built up their whole agent team, the first agent framework, for 2 years. And then I left and, found my co-founders. One of them I met at Fetch actually, and one of them I met like proper anon on Discord, and we built up like a relationship, and it was great. And then we founded Valry.
Yeah, that's
never
pretty
looked back.
Very cool. Very cool. So where can people find OLAS online? What do you want to plug? And if there's anything that I should have mentioned that I didn't, feel free to mention it now.
Well, we covered a lot of ground. So if you want to check it out, go to olas.network. There's all the ways to get involved, all these roles we talked about. Also follow us on Twitter. It's still the old handle, Autonolas. We have a big announcement today in Berlin. So whenever this is coming out, it might already have happened. But basically, check that announcement out because it will make running agents much, much simpler.
Wow. I look forward to finding out what this is all about. So, David, thank you so much for taking the time. Very much appreciated. Congratulations on all the success. This is a super fascinating project, so I'm glad we were able to make it happen. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This is Hash Rate. We'll see you all next time.